Welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology application principles. This video is on magnetic energy and cold fusion, and hopefully I'll keep doing these until the men in black take this channel down, which could be literally any moment now. So, this is just one example of how to produce a cold fusion type of reaction using magnetic energy as the catalyst for that process. So this doesn't negate anything else that's being done around the planet with cold fusion. I'm just trying to offer this very alternative and very informal and unscripted video to help maybe educate people a little bit on how magnetic energy can help in this process. So we'll begin with a solution that has hydrogen peroxide in it and just a 3.5 volt DC charge just to help with activation. Now, this particular concept or design or unit does not incorporate deuterium because what we're trying to do is maximize the amount of bubbles that are created, because from a magnetic energy point of view, we are going to imprint on those bubbles. We have magnets spinning beneath that solution, and we need a solution that has a lot of energy flowing through it, that's freely flowing through it. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. And then we have a copper screen to help with that process. And what we're looking for is surface tension of bubbles on top of the hydrogen peroxide tank, on top of a liquid tank, and then inside the unit we're pulling a vacuum to keep those bubbles, to keep their structural integrity strong enough that so we can capture them. We need them to stay in full form, and there's a concept that we refer to called redistribution. And in the magnetic energy world, redistribution is a way of molecular structures basically reverting or converting back into an original state or another state or a transdimensional state. And while the hydrogen peroxide is in that bubble form, it's getting close to the redistribution process. This gives us an opportunity to capitalize on that and capture that energy. So what we're doing from the very get-go is we're saturating them with alternating magnetic polarities at a high speed rotation, like 5,700 RPMs, I think it is, and we're exposing them to a neutral magnetic field and we're conditioning them and changing the flow of energy between those molecular bonds to become more and more neutral so that we can then harness this energy. So then as the bubbles get to the top of the tank, they contact palladium plates. And the palladium is obviously ideal for this circumstance because of its ability to absorb hydrogen. But it's not only that, around the palladium plates, we are subjecting them to alternating magnetic fields, high speed rotation, that alter them and get them in a hyper dimensional state. So what we can do is we can use them as a paramagnetic material to then take in the hydrogen, and the hydrogen essentially is being attracted to the magnetic field, and it's going to pass through the palladium. And in that process, those hydrogen molecules will combine. We are basically fusing that hydrogen energy and creating a tremendous amount of energy in the magnetic field that then we will utilize. And I'll get right back to that in a second, but I want to come back to gravity because, and I've talked about this on other videos, gravity plays an essential role in this process. In the magnetic energy world, gravity is compressed magnetism. So that means it is a significantly more amount of magnetic energy compressed into a given space, such as our Earth and the atmosphere and everything around us. On our planet, gravity has a specific pulse rate. It has a specific elemental signature, a specific energetic signature, I should say. And it is a very infiltrating process, is maybe one way to say it, in the sense that inside of the gravity circuit, which starts from outside of our ionosphere and goes to in the interior of the planet, inside of that, it essentially influences everything. So I have to get into a little bit of detail on why or how that's happening, what that process is, so that the cold fusion idea becomes a little bit more like realistic or possible. Like any of this is realistic. So as gravity, as compressed magnetism feeds through its circuit, it has a response. There's a differential and charge response. So it's feeding from the outside the ionosphere to the Earth. While it's doing that, it blends with the energy flow through basically every molecular structure. So we got to separate things just very quickly. We have elements that have a specific configuration, a molecular configuration, and a very strong energetic flow between them. So imagine there's nothing solid at all. It's an energy configuration, and it has a higher dimensional template that it's connected to. If we're talking about breaking apart specific elements, we've got to hit those frequencies or hit those resonance, those magnetic resonance points. But in this case, we don't care too much about breaking apart a specific element. What we do care about is the energetic bonds between those specific elements. So when you have a group of any type of molecular structures, there's a difference between the magnetic energy flow that happens with the specific elements and then with the elements adjoining to each other. So the flow between the elements that are adjoining to each other is easier for us to influence. The compressed magnetic energy or gravity is always blending with those energy vortexes that connect the elements together. It's always blending with them. As long as they're inside of the gravity circuit, it contributes to them. So how gravity works in the magnetic energy world is it's not that there's any kind of molecules that are being attracted to the Earth because of mass. That's completely ridiculous. What's happening is there's a blending of a magnetic energy gravity pulse rate that's contributing to every single molecular structure and the energy flowing through it. As the gravity energy flows through a group of molecular structures, that gravity energy is part of the existing gravity circuit that feeds to the lower rim inside the Earth. So that's why some things, everything's going to respond differently according to the complexity of that molecular structure. And so it's the energy flow, it's the energy vortex, it becomes part of that circuit. As soon as it's outside that circuit, that gravity circuit no longer impacts it. It no longer blends with it. So it's the energy fields and the energy vortices that are being attracted or being included in the gravity circuit. And that's really important because when you're talking about hydrogen peroxide, it gives us an elemental structure that is very easy for us to influence the gravity circuit. We don't have to completely negate it. We just have to influence it enough, and that will allow for a cold fusion or even a cold fission process to take place. So when you rotate and counter rotate magnetic fields, and you have opposing polarities, what we call opposing polarities, they're all part of the same structure because it's an inflow and outflow of those magnets. So instead of thinking north-south, just for a minute, imagine a group of magnets, and what they are is they're an inflow and an outflow. A magnet has an inflow of energy and an outflow of energy. When we put those reversed to each other, now we're bombarding the palladium and the hydrogen peroxide with an inflow and outflow of magnetic energy, of a magnetic field. And so the magnets are nothing more than a catalyst to that hyperdimensional, to that Teslian energy, the etheric energy flow. They're a catalyst to that, and we're creating an inflow and outflow blend, which then results in a neutral position, and it hyper elevates the molecules and the reactivity inside of the palladium and in the hydrogen. So the hydrogen is readily absorbed into the palladium. Now it's being combined by those magnetic fields, and that energy is then passing through the magnets, and the first place that we attract it to is in the generating coils. Now it comes through as a random process. Like, we can't control, for example, what part of the hydrogen peroxide tank where the bubbles they randomly disperse. And so in order to accommodate for that, we have jumper wires and we have a generating coil system that can accommodate differences in the intensity of where the energy is coming through. Then after that point, we circulate that energy essentially from those to the motor coils in a controlled manner. And now through commutation, we can control the timing of the motor coils. And now we're talking getting into more of like a conventional type of design, where now we can control the timing of the motor coils, and now we have tremendous power in those coils, and that gives us a lot of torque. So you can kind of, hopefully you're getting, I'm explaining that at least somewhat clearly, but the idea here is we're using the magnets as a conduit. We are getting the palladium in a state that's receptive. We are getting the hydrogen in a magnetic state that's receptive. And then there's a little more action going on with the generator coils and the motor coils, but it's the same type of principle where we're getting that energy into those coils, and then creating at the final output is then creating polarities, recreating polarities out of the neutral energy so that we can control the timing of those polarities and create a tremendous amount of torque against the magnets. So I hope that gives some indication of how magnetic energy can influence cold fusion and help create cold fusion and room temperature energy. This concept is, it's an essentially an unlimited source of energy. When we have those, not only is the palladium becomes very connected to its etheric template, so does the liquid, so does the hydrogen peroxide. It becomes very connected to its ethereal template, and that allows for a tremendous amount of efficiency. If you were to call it fuel, it wouldn't really, people may call it fuel, but that's kind of a misnomer. The liquid isn't actually the fuel, it's the etheric energy that we're getting from the liquid that's the actual fuel. Because then people will look at it and go, well, wait, for that amount of horsepower, how are you using such little fuel? But it's not, the liquid isn't the fuel, it's the etheric energy. And the bubbles are so critical because before they redistribute, that allows us to grab that energy, and that has a relatively neutral charge because of what we've done to the bubbles before we grab them. So if you can kind of picture that whole process, it helps hopefully give some clarity on magnetic energy and cold fusion. And with that said, we'll see you next time.